Using a paddle with the incorrect height, stiffness, or blade size can cause harm to your body and ruin your experience on the water. So today we're going to be talking about what you should be looking for in a paddle to make sure you avoid having these problems and ensure you have many more enjoyable paddles to come. And at the end of this video, I'm going to be sharing what my personal paddle preferences are as a toddler paddler, so make sure you stick around to the end for that. Alright, let's start off talking about a few reasons why using the correct paddle height is so important. If you use a paddle that is too tall, you're actually going to cause more harm to your shoulders and upper body, and you're going to have a more awkward paddle stroke. Similar, if you use a paddle that is too short, you're going to cause more harm to your lower back, you're going to find it harder to balance on your paddleboard, and it's going to be harder for you to fully submerge your paddle blade with each paddle stroke as well. So there are a few factors to consider when choosing the correct paddle height. The first one being how tall you are as a paddler, as obviously we're all different sizes. The second factor to consider is what type of paddleboard you're using to paddle on the water with. For example, if you're paddling on an inflatable paddleboard, that board is going to be much thicker, causing you to be much higher up on top of the water, therefore causing you to need to use a taller paddle. Likewise, if you're using a SUP surfboard or even a race board that has a dugout, you're going to be much closer to the surface level of the water, therefore causing you to need to use a shorter paddle height because your body is closer to the water. And the last factor to consider when it comes to your paddle height is what type of paddling you're doing on the water. For example, if you're doing more long distance paddles or if you're doing more chill paddle days as well, you're going to want a paddle that's a little bit longer. This simply allows you to stand a little bit more upright as you're paddling around on the water, but at the same time still allow you to fully submerge your paddle blade in the water as well. If you're doing more paddleboard racing, such as sprints, or doing a lot more paddleboard surfing as well, you're actually going to want to use a shorter paddle height, which simply allows you to stay lower to the water and have a more aggressive stance on your paddleboard, getting more power out of each paddle stroke. So those are the three different factors that you need to consider when choosing the correct paddle height. The first one being how tall you are as a paddler, the second one being what type of board you're using on the water, and the third one being what type of paddling you're doing on the water. Once you know those three different factors, you actually use a chart that was designed by Black Project SUP to use as a reference to help you decide the exact height that you should be using with your paddle. Alright, let's move on and talk about the importance of choosing a paddle with the correct shaft stiffness and diameter size. If you're using a paddle that has too stiff of shaft, you're actually going to cause, once again, more harm to your shoulders and upper body and cause more fatigue over time as you're paddling. At the same time, if you're using a paddle that has too much flex in the shaft, you're actually going to lose power with each paddle stroke. So once again, it comes back to those three major factors. But instead of talking more about how tall you are as a person, we're actually talking more about your body size. For example, if you're a larger or heavier person, you're actually going to want to use a stiffer shaft. This allows you to put more force on your paddle, still ensuring that you're not getting too much flex out of it as you pull your larger mass through the water. At the same time, if you're a lighter rider, you want to make sure you're using a shaft that has more flex in it as you're pulling less mass through the water with your body size. Another factor to consider is what type of paddleboard you're using as well. If you're using a larger, heavier, all-around paddleboard, once again, you're going to want a little bit stiffer shaft as you're pulling more mass to the water once again. Likewise, if you're using a lighter or more narrow paddleboard, you can actually use a shaft with more flex in it as you're pulling less mass through the water and have less resistance. And the third factor to consider once again is the type of paddling you're doing on the water. For longer distance paddles on the water, you actually want to use a shaft that has more flex in it. This simply allows you to save energy and also help protect your shoulders as you're paddling for a longer time on the water. But if you're focused more on shorter distance paddling and more sprint racing, you actually want to use a shaft that has more stiffness to it, allowing you to get more power out of each stroke. And since you're paddling for such a short distance, you don't have to be worried about saving or conserving that energy. So once again, once you know those factors, you can take that information and apply it to the Black Project SUP's chart to help you determine what stiffness you should be using in your paddle shaft as well as the diameter size. And lastly, let's talk about the importance of choosing the correct blade size. Once again, if you're a larger paddler or if you're using a larger paddle board, you want to use a larger blade size. This allows you to grasp more water with each paddle stroke, allowing you to pull your heavier mass and your larger paddle board through the water. On the reverse side, if you're a smaller paddler or using a smaller paddle board or a race board, you actually want to use a more narrow blade size. This allows you to conserve energy and also help protect your body as you're paddling on the water. When it comes to the type of paddling that you're doing on the water, if you're someone who's focused more on the touring or more longer distance paddles, you want to use a more narrow blade size, as this once again helps you save energy and protect your body. But if you want the most amount of power and speed out of each paddle stroke, such as for sprint racing or for paddleboard surfing, you want to use a larger blade size, as this allows you to grab more water with each paddle stroke. Black Project SUP does sell their paddles in a variety of blade sizes, so make sure you use that information you have about yourself. Refer to their chart they have provided for you once again to help you decide which size paddle blade you should buy with your paddle. For this last segment, I simply wanted to share with you the type of paddle that I prefer to use on the water as a taller person. The main type of paddling that I'm focused on is the longer distance paddles. So with that information and my body size as a person, I have chosen to use the Black Project SUP HydroFlow X paddle. Now with my body height being 6'4", I have this paddle set to 83 inches tall, and I feel like this height is a very good height for me to use for those longer distance paddles on the water. I'm able to have good form on my paddle board while still protecting my body with each paddle stroke as well. When it comes to staff stiffness, I've chosen to use the stiff version of a paddle shaft. Now I typically do not recommend using a stiff shaft for longer distance paddles, but I have found with my body frame being so much taller and me having to use a longer, taller shaft, that with a stiffer shaft, I'm able to still get some flex out of it and still able to protect my shoulders while paddling for a longer distance still. Now I don't mind using a medium flex shaft as that does allow me to get more flex out of that shaft, but for my personal preferences and being so tall, I do feel like I get more power out of each paddle stroke with a stiffer shaft while still getting some flex out of it because it's so long, which helps me protect my shoulders and my upper body as well. For the blade size, I'm using a large blade on this paddle, which once again allows me to get a good amount of power out of each paddle stroke while still protecting my body for the longer distance paddles. But as we talked about in this video, each person is unique, and the type of paddle that you should be using will probably look different than the type of paddle that I'm using. But I hope you found today's video helpful, and I highly encourage you to take all information that you learned in today's video and go check out Black Project SUP's website to learn more about the different type of paddles they have available for you to use, as well as go check out their paddle size chart, which is all linked down below in the description. That's it for today though, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.